About 50 years ago, an astronaut returning from the moon experienced things that he couldn't find a scientific explanation for. So, with some colleagues, he launched a new science focused on the mind and how it works in the body and across space and time. It's the field of Noetics, where the tools of modern science are used to help us understand how what we think and feel affects us and the world around us. Now, this is Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments from the studios of KXCR Community Radio in Florence, Oregon.
Hello there, and welcome to Noetic Moments, where we explore the field of research that discovers what consciousness is, what it does, how it works, and how our lives could be very different if we understood it better. I'm Ruth Miller, and through this series of programs, I'm explaining some of the ideas and experiments and introducing some of the people whose work has defined this field of research. I'll also explore some relevant news items and answer any questions that you send to my email address, ruth@noeticmoments.org. Well, just to remind you, our culture generally has two ways of thinking about consciousness. In the world of medicine and psychology, it's being awake, aware, knowing what's going on around us. In the field of noetics, though, as it's emerged over the last 100 years, consciousness is much more. In various definitions, it is the processes and products of mind, both in our awareness and outside of it. It is profound human experiences, and some say it's what connects us all. So far in this series, we've looked at a number of models of what consciousness is and how it works. We started with Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung in the early 20th century, and then into the mid-century with Charles Tart's 1960s work on states of consciousness and Julian Jaynes, who related consciousness to the separation of right and left hemispheres of our brain, and some of the field models of the mind that have been developed by Rupert Sheldrake, Kurt Lewin, and others. And then we began to consider how quantum mechanics relates to consciousness with the work of David Bohm, Dana Zohar, Amit Goswami, and others. We also looked at the global brain, or noosphere, as described by Peter Russell, Teilhard de Chardin, and Ervin Laszlo. And we explored the field of transpersonal psychology, which was founded in the 1970s to apply some of these newer understandings in therapy and in research. Last week, we looked at Bruce Lipton and Candace Pert's work as they described molecules of emotion and the biology of belief. You can catch up on those past shows on the KXCR.net archives. Click on the little cloud up on the banner at the top of the screen at KXCR.net and on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where you'll also find links to the clips, the books, and the authors that I mention and use here on the show. Today, we're beginning to look at some of the experiments that have documented this broader understanding of consciousness. Recording and integrating such studies has been the primary focus of the IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, from its beginning in the early 70s. And early volumes of the IONS Journal include dozens of experiments from around the world with commentaries and recommendations for further research. For the past several decades, the research at IONS has been documented as well in books, particularly those by now senior scientist Dean Radin. Through these books, we can trace the evolution of the research. Particularly, we can see the results of various experiments through the eyes of a statistician who regularly and thoroughly computes the probability that such results could have happened by chance. Is it possible that in a random series of occurrences this particular result might have happened? If so, how probable is it? 1 chance in 2, like the flip of a coin? 1 chance in 6, like the turning of dice? 1 chance in 100, or 1,000, or 10,000, or even 1,000,000? Some of his results are just amazing, like 1 chance in 50,000 or 5 million. When viewed through such lenses, the likelihood of some of the experimental results that, for example, we heard about when we were talking about Edgar Mitchell's experiences, the probability that any of those might have happened by chance becomes nearly astronomically improbable. This idea of randomness is fundamental to most modern scientific research. And for that reason, many research computers have been programmed with software that generates numbers randomly. Well, very near so anyway. When I was in college, friends who operated the big mainframe computers sometimes occupied themselves in the middle of the night with seeing if they could focus their attention on the computer's output in a way that it was no longer random. So it would produce a long string of ones or a long string of zeros on its grid of random ones and zeros, or sometimes they would even try to make a shape like a square, and some of them got pretty good at it. Lots of folks were doing this, and when the personal computers came out, they started doing such things on the smaller computers. One group, led by engineering professor Roger Nelson at Princeton University, started testing whether people who were not operating the computers could affect such patterns. And they did. So let Roger tell you about their experiments.
We really asked people individually to try to change the behavior of sensitive devices. And the one we used most was called a random number generator, or random event generator. We usually abbreviated that to REG. The experiments amounted to was asking a person sitting a meter or two away from this box on the table, which was generating random numbers. That means completely unpredictable sequences of numbers. We asked people to change that by wishing or willing or praying, if they, whatever technique they wanted to use. And despite there was no connection, no switch they could turn, no wires to hold, they were able to do this. Now, it was a small effect, and it didn't happen every time a person tried, but it happened so consistently that over the years we built a large database of very persuasive information saying human consciousness is not stuck inside the head, it's not stuck inside the body, but extends out into the world. It can actually change the physical world ever so slightly. So we did this experiment and others somewhat like it, using different kinds of machines and asking a variety of different kinds of questions. Eventually, we built smaller and smaller devices until we had ones that could fit in the palm of your hand, that we could attach to tiny computers. This work is a long time ago. It's in the 1990s. There was no such thing as a laptop when we really started. We had portable computers, but they were like small suitcases. Eventually, though, we had palm-top computers, not much bigger than an iPhone. And we could attach our random number generators to that and go out into the field and do what we called field REG research. We went to churches where they were having ceremonies, or we went to the woods with pagan groups where they were going to do rituals celebrating the full moon. We went to great, beautiful concerts of almost any kind of concert. We had people going to the opera and taking data during the opera, and in particular during the arias, the ones that people recognize and commune with. Everybody knows the aria already, and people become a kind of coherent group shaped by the music. We also went to places like shopping centers and street corners and train stations where we predicted there would be no effect. We predicted there would be an effect if people were brought by the situation into a kind of coherence and resonance with each other. And that's what we found. In the rituals, in the great music situations, we found the data, instead of wandering randomly as we expect random number generator numbers to do, they would take off. So this experiment, which we called Field REG, allowed us to establish nicely that there is such a thing, there can be such a thing as a group consciousness, which has some characteristics shared with the individuals that are in there, but which seems to be a kind of separate entity. And what it seems that we were able to show was that if you have a random number generator that's whose future is unpredictable, in a situation where there's a coherent consciousness developing, it looks almost as if that coherence, that coherent group, includes this random number generator. In other words, it's part of the group consciousness. And we think that is probably why it changes.
After a while, they built a network of such computers, each running a random number generator, and they tested whether other groups of folks could pull them off random, and of course they did. And then they added a bunch more computers from different places in the world and held events at specific times to see if they could pull the whole network off randomness, and they did. And then in 1997, Princess Diana died, and the whole network showed that curve of coherence that was further off random than anyone could have expected. They added a few more computers to the network, and other people started experimenting with them. For example, Art Bell on his coast-to-coast radio station would ask his millions of listeners to focus on someone or something, and the computers at Princeton would respond. It was soon known as the Global Consciousness Project, and many people were fascinated by it. Then, on September 11, 2001, the World Trade Center towers in Manhattan were destroyed by commercial jetliners, and the graph went off the paper. You can see this on the internet in many places, the globalconsciousnessproject.org being one of them, but they're also on Wikipedia and a lot of other places. And it's fully and beautifully described in the film Something We Don't Know What, which is a video that I have linked in the website noeticmoments.org. Literally, looking at this graph, at 9 a.m. West Coast time, when California was just beginning to get the news about what was going on in Manhattan, the line that usually goes back and forth around zero was spiking to several thousand places above zero. And over the next several hours and days, that line remained far from random as different people woke up in places around the world and different responses were made known to the general public, even going well below the zero line on the Friday when 3 minutes of silence were being observed. Also interesting is that there were fluctuations away from zero in the hours before the actual event, suggesting that people were beginning to feel the event and its effects even before it happened. Well, what's going on here? What's really happening? I'm going to say there are three things, really, that need to be acknowledged with the results of this project. And the first one is the one that Roger named. Our minds are not contained in our bodies, and they really do affect the material world around us, particularly the sensitive ones like electronic devices. Computers are electronic, their software is electronic, and people are clearly, in these experiments and in their own play, modifying either the software or the hardware that is responding to the software, the programs, when they shift the output from random line to some coherent line. Our second point is that our minds really do communicate across time and space. The 9/11 results are tied to events with specific times in a specific place that are well documented, but the changes in the results are related to when people became aware of those events in other places. For example, the peak at 9 when the West Coast began to become aware of something going on the East Coast. And the third point of what is happening here is that our minds are often aware of events before we know it. That is, our subconscious awareness peaks before our conscious awareness wakes up. Now, this is being tested in a number of ways at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and other places by having people watch a random set of images and seeing when their body response occurs. And it's often as much as a full second, but certainly partial seconds, before the person hits the button or before their eyes expand in response to seeing the image. It's quite something. So the Global Consciousness Project offers us an insight into a whole range of possibilities having to do with the nature of human consciousness, the nature of collective human consciousness, the relationship between individual consciousness and the physical world around us, and the relationship between group consciousness and the physical world around us. And those questions fascinate me. I'm hoping that you're getting a little bit of that curiosity yourself. We'll talk more about what might be the consequence of these ideas as we go forward on this show. All right, so now we're going to take a look at a book, and I want to look at a book that's authored by three women who are part of, or were when they wrote this, part of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Marilyn Schlitz, Cassandra Vighton, and Tina Amarok, all of whom have PhDs. And there is a foreword by Robert Thurman, who has a PhD, and he's a well-known speaker of the subject of Buddhism and meditation. The back of the book, Deepak Chopra says, a brilliant synthesis of science and wisdom from the world's greatest spiritual traditions, both ancient and modern, translated into practical tools for anyone who is seeking more depth and meaning in their life. And there are other people, Joan Borisenko, Ervin Laszlo, we heard from him a while ago. Ervin Laszlo says, the timely transformation of our thinking, valuing, and living is the key to achieving a more peaceful and sustainable civilization. This book offers a way to achieve this transformation for all concerned citizens of our stressed and endangered planet. The subtitle of Living Deeply is The Art and Science of Transformation in Everyday Life, based on a decade-long research program at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. There are articles and quotes from all kinds of well-known people in the field of transpersonal psychology, as well as in the world of spiritual and self-development. The introduction starts with, if you're like most people, your life has become increasingly complex and fast-paced. As you rush from one event or task to another, you're most likely being bombarded by, quote, weapons of mass destruction that tip you off course, even as you dutifully struggle to maintain your balance. And then they say in section on Living Deeply in the introduction, as you will read, our decade of research on transformation has found that dramatic and lasting change for the better springs from radically shifting your perspective of who you are. Great external changes often come out of this shift in perspective. You may well find that as meaning and purpose become more clear to you, things that are out of alignment in your life gradually, and sometimes quickly, fall away. And then they go on in The Art and Science of Transformation, still in the introduction. In this book, we share what we've learned about transformation through a decade-long program of research, and we explore how our research findings can help you live more fully and deeply, no matter who you are, where you come from, or what your current path is, whether you seek to transform your life completely or simply make adjustments that will add a layer of richness and depth. They start out with, surprise, surprise, in Chapter 1, the first heading is, what is consciousness? They say, consciousness is the quality of mind that includes your own internal reality. It includes self-awareness, your relationships to your environment and the people in your life, and your worldview or model of reality. Simply put, your consciousness determines how you experience the world. They talk about states of consciousness and abiding consciousness. They introduce that concept, which we haven't talked about too much, but it's been implied. And then the idea of mystical or mundane is suggested, is brought in. We use consciousness transformation as an umbrella term for transformations that take place in all kinds of contexts. However, some of the most profound and life-altering transformations typically either have a spiritual component or occur in the context of religious experience or practice. A U.S. General Social Survey in 1998 found that 39% of people have had a spiritual or religious experience that changed their lives. A survey of more than 2,000 adults by the Barna Group found that over half of those sampled described their life as having been, quote, greatly transformed, unquote, by their religious faith. And that was in 2006. So they talk about both the kinds of experiments that have been done and the historical results that have been described in various religious traditions. One of the points that they make, I'm here on page 68, the transformative experience, a choice point, is the heading. Why is it that some powerful experiences, sometimes even just one, can change your consciousness in deep and lasting ways, while other deeply powerful experiences don't seem to have any effect at all? A well-established theory from developmental psychologists offers some suggestions, and they start to talk about Jean Piaget and our developmental process. As I'm going to skip down beyond that description, they say, thus, as we learn, we're naturally focused to stretch and revise our worldviews. So in the realm of noetics, we've begun to integrate hard science, the soft sciences of psychology and anthropology, and philosophical traditions and spirituality to understand how it is that consciousness works and is changed over time. I'm coming to the end of the book, and there are several quotes from a variety of places, and they have what they call take-home messages at the end of the book here on 211 before a list of resources. Notice catalysts, windows of opportunity, and moments pregnant with transformative potential, large and small. Recognize what you can and do bring to the table. Discern what is right and true for you based both on your subjective experience and your observations. Practice holding intention and cultivating attention. Repairing life-enhancing actions. Repeating life-enhancing actions and seeking both internal and external guidance. Integrate your transformative practices into your life. Expand your practice and your transformation beyond the personal. Connect with the mystery, the sacred ground of all being, and live deeply in every way you can. They have, as I say, a list of resources, a list of books, and a list of teachers in the back. This is Living Deeply by Schlitz, Vietan, and Amarok, with a foreword by Robert Thurman. It's published by New Harbinger Publications, Noetic Books. And I'm looking for the date here. It's not a new book, but it's a wonderful, wonderful adjunct. 2007 to your own transformative processes. Well, that sound tells us that it's time to explore an application at this point. One of the things that this project produced was the idea of living the life of transformation and the creation of living practice. On page 158, it says, one way to look at how practice is currently being integrated into your own life is to explore the extent to which practice has permeated the different domains of your everyday experience. Make a chart in 3 columns. On the left, list the domains of your life in the center, the ways you're presently integrating practice into these individual domains. And on the right, list the ways you'd like to either integrate practice more fully into a specific domain or recognize a domain more explicitly as a practice. Domains might be work, family, social health, finances, etc. So that set of practices came out of the book Living Deeply, which was our review today. And hopefully you have something useful that you can take home and work on. It would be a useful exercise, I am sure. Well, that's it for today's show. The next time we get together, we'll look at even more of the research done at the institute that Edgar Mitchell founded, the Institute of Noetic Sciences in Petaluma, California. Well, we're out of time for today. But remember, you can continue the exploration on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where there's a list of the titles and other resources we refer to on the show, along with archived past shows, and where you can send me your comments and questions, and I'll do my best to get them answered the next time we're on the air. For now, thanks for joining me here on Noetic Moments at KXCR Community Radio, 90.7 FM in Florence, Oregon. And have a wonderful week.
You've been listening to Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments. This program is produced in the studios of KXCR Community Radio in beautiful Florence, Oregon, supported by you, our listeners. Our theme music is Tumbling Planets, composed and performed by Jeff Lovejoy. To hear this program again or learn more about Noetic Sciences, search our website, www.noeticmoments.org.